Okay, all right. Without further ado, now I would like to hand over to Mr. Lim for the presentation. Mr. Lim, please.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Li Cheng. I'm here to present my dissertations done in the program of Master of Communication. My dissertation is entitled An Analysis Among Facebook News Agencies in Malaysia, the news coverage on the COVID-19 pandemic. First of all, this research studied the differences in the news frequency, news forms, and news patterns on the news coverage of the COVID-19 pandemic on the Facebook fan page of Malaysia Guinea, Astro Awani, and Sinchu Daily during the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. The quantitative content analysis has been used in this research, and the period of the samples used in this research is within the first phase of MCO, which is 18th March 2020 to 31st March 2020. I believe everyone agrees that COVID-19 has brought significant influence to our life. Based on the previous experience on SARS, H1N1, and other pandemic, we could know that we need a sufficient volumes of news and accurate information to understand the current situation, to avoid the circumstance of low awareness, and to reduce the risk of infection. So, based on the problem statements, the research questions were listed down. Firstly, what are the differences in news frequency between the Facebook fan page of Malaysia Guinea, Astro Awani, and Sinchu Daily during the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic? Secondly, what are the differences in news forms used in the Facebook fan page of Malaysia Guinea, Astro Awani, and Sinchu Daily during the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic? Lastly, what are the differences in news pattern used in the Facebook fan page of Malaysia Guinea, Astro Awani, and Sinchu Daily during the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic? And the research objectives are as follows. Firstly, to identify the differences in news frequency on the Facebook fan page of Malaysia Guinea, Astro Awani, and Sinchu Daily during the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Secondly, to examine the differences in news form in the Facebook fan page of Malaysia Guinea, Astro Awani, and Sinchu Daily during the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. And lastly, to analyze the differences in news patterns in the Facebook fan page of Malaysia Guinea, Astro Awani, and Sinchu Daily during the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic. From the previous study, we know that the pandemic will be widely reported because it generally meets all the news value. A list of news value related to pandemic listed down in the previous study are expectation, intensity, negativity, relevance, meaningfulness, unambiguity, continuity, and unpredictability. And the different news slangs used in the news coverage can result in different feelings in the audience. The news slangs can be divided into alarming, reassuring, and neutral. Besides, there are 6 dimensions about the news frames on the health news coverage generated by Braham in 2001, which include health risks, medical or scientific issue, preventions or protections, economic consequences, societal problems, and political and legal issues. So, from here, we can know that the news story published on different news agencies went through a framing process. The media framing theory is used in this research. According to Ganam in 1997, the core value of media framing is to guide the audience how to think about on a specific issue. And Griffin, Littlebat, and Sparks in 2019 stated that it is impossible for a news story not to have a frame. Thus, through the literature review before an issue is reported as a piece of news, it needed to ensure that it is newsworthy. If the news is worth reporting, the journalists will use their tools to produce the news, such as different kinds of news patterns, news forms, and updating the latest information. Journalists report the event or issues based on some perception. Media framing always plays in the process of news production. This framework was produced with the reference of Domingo models in 2008 and Harnick's and Hoxha's models in 2014. The framework of this study is study the process of news productions on the news frequency, news forms, and news patterns. To answer the research questions and achieve the research objective, quantitative content analysis was adopted in this research. A coding sheet and coding book was generated as an instrument and operating manual for collecting data. There was 1,305 online COVID-19 news collected from Facebook fan page of 3 different language news agencies during the first phase of MCO. The 3 news agencies are Malaysia Kini, Astro Awani, and Sinchun Daily. They were listed as popular Malaysian online news source in Reuters Institute Digital News Reports 2019. The intercoded reliability and face validity was done in this research. Out of the 1,305 news reporting, 73.4% news was from Malaysia Kini, which was started as an online news agency from the beginning, and 10.2% of news were from Astro Awani, which is one of the famous television news agency in Malaysia. Another 16.2% of the news reports were from Sinchu Daily, which started as an traditional printed news agency. The date to 25 March 2020 mark as the day that have highest volume of news coverage within the first phase of MCO in 3 of the news agencies. On the same date, Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin announced the extensions of MCO due to the news cases continuously grow. From the news source aspect, governmental persons becomes the most popular news source to the newsroom. This is because the minister and public servant deliver all the announcements regarding health, economics, and MCO issue. However, the scientists and health professionals will score 7.2% in the total analysis news, which was the second lowest news source. And there were various news forms used in the news coverage of COVID-19 due to social media allowing a variety of multimedia forms to convey their message and interact with audience. Generally, the nature of the news agency industry will influence the pathway of its development in the online news industry. The findings found that 98.3% of COVID-19 news in the first phase of MCO are in the forms of text article. The second highest usage form is video, which score 10%, following with live stream, which score 5.1%. The prominence of salience of the news is measured by the length, sections, and so on physical items in traditional printed news. However, the prominence of news on social media can use the audience response, such as numbers of likes, comments, and shares to measure. The findings on the prominence of news forms found the text articles are still the most popular news forms, and it's able to generate a lot of audience response. The numbers of live streamed and video news, although not as much as the text article news, they still gain a very well performance. News length, also known as tone of news, in this research, it has been divided into alarming, reassuring, balanced, and neutral. The findings found that there is mostly neutral news during the first phase of MCO and following with alarming news. Sinchu Daily is the only one that the neutral news did not over 50% of its all COVID-19 news coverage, which score only 45%, and Astro Awani is the only one that its volume of reassuring news is more than half of its alarming news. In the aspect of prominence of news, no significant prominence of news length on the COVID-19 news shown in the findings. It seems like audience will consume the news without differentiating the tones of news. The dimension of news are referring to the category of the contents. The findings shows that almost half of the COVID-19 news reported in the first phase of MCO was related to the dimensions of associated problems. The news with the dimensions of medical or scientific had the lowest volumes in the first phase of MCO. There is also no significant difference shown in the prominence of the dimensions of news. However, in general, the social problem is not the primary content that's popular among audience. News value is also one of the elements of news patterns. News values helps to highlight the meanings of news to the public and society. The findings reveals that most of the news in the first phase of MCO meets the values of relevance, which means that most of the news was local news and related to Malaysians. The lowest usage news value is unpredictability, which used to report the events, issues, and figures that hard to focus and predict. In the prominence of news, the prominence of news values shows that news reporting contains values of intensity, expectations, and continuity were highly responded by audience on Facebook, and this not in line with the news value frequently used in the news coverage by those online news agency, which is relevance, meaningfulness, and negativity. From the findings, we could conclude that the diversity of news forms can help to convey the message effectively. Besides text article, online news agency may try to generate news with video or live stream, which had well performance in audience response on Facebook. However, too much news also not valuable for the effectiveness of communication. Overflow of news can cause media hype and makes the audience become numbness to the content. And the research findings suggest that the dimension of news could add in educational issues, public opinions, and advertisement, which are the contents that frequently appear in online news within the first phase of MCO. Besides, the mind relaxing is another news value that could be added to the list of news value during a pandemic. This is because some news is purposely created to reduce the anxiety of the public. On the side of limitations, Sinchu Daily and Astro Awani are the news source of the sample in this research. However, they were not beginning as an online news agency. They had been trying to transform into online news media operating both online and offline. They were chosen as the news source of the sample because they were on the list of popular online media in Reuters Institute Digital News Report 2019. Another limitation is that the researcher of the research, that is me, is the only coder in this research. However, the intercoder reliability was done after the pilot test to ensure the result reliability. Future research could study the relationship between the news frequency and knowledge of COVID-19. The comparisons of online news and printed news, the different phase of MCO is also valuable to study. In conclusion, the data of this research obtains from 3 different language online news agencies. They help to enhance the objectivity of this research, and the results are applicable to other communication study. And that would be all of my dissertation presentations. Thank you.
All right. We thank you, Mr. Lim, for his presentation. Okay, before we proceed to the second presentation, just a quick reminder for you. If you have any question to ponder, kindly drop your questions to our Microsoft team, and I'm pretty sure that our presenter will be very delighted to solve your problem and questions. Okay, right now we proceed to our second presentation. Okay, please, Jeremy.
A very good evening to everyone. My name is Larry J. I'm one of the Master of Communication students from Southern University College. So today's I would like to discuss with you about the organizational communication, like my research study, this title, an analysis on the preferred communication medium by different generation in improving the communication among the staff at Southern University College. So from the introduction, organizational communication is the daily operational and significant tool to help exchange information. So we know that communication is a very important tool to help the colleague and staff to exchange the information and transmit the information. The organization also identifies signs of strengthening the organizational communication, since this could influence the positive energy to employee in the workplace, like stimulating the motivation, enhancing the job satisfaction, and boosting the job performance. So the purpose of this research is to examine the preferred communication medium by different generations, improving the communication among the staff at Southern University College. And so from this figure, we can see that different generation, no matter the older generation, younger generation, and they have their preferred communication medium. So the preferred communication medium could be the face-to-face communication, oral communication, written communication, or digital communication. So when they're choosing their own preferred communication medium, so how they going to improving the communication in the process? The background of this study is I'm choosing the Southern University College is one of the higher education institute in Malaysia. This institute actually founded on 1990 as the first non-profit institute. And Southern UC located in Skudai area of Johor Bahru, Malaysia. There are total around 230 employees who serve as academicians and administrators. The problem statement from this Southern University College and the communication regarding the multi-generation communication breakdown and a different way of communication cause many conflict in organization, which is a serious concern for them. And also the diverse generation in one organization will bring about the miscommunication and misperception. It may cause minor and major mistakes that may impact the job performance, job dissatisfaction, turnover rate, and so on. In Southern UC, the main problem is communication breakdown. And when it happens, the leader do not know how to communicate right way with this different generation. So for my research study, and this research question will be developed. And research question 1, what are the communication medium preferred by different generation? Research question 2, what are the reasons of using the preferred communication medium in organizational communication by different generation staff in Southern UC? And the last research question, how are the communication style improved among the Southern University College staff? The research objective definitely is to identify the preferred communication medium by different generation staff of Southern UC and to analyze the reason of using the preferred communication medium in organizational communication by different generation staff in Southern UC. To explore the effectiveness of communication style among the staff in Southern UC. From the theoretical framework, I use this media richness theory originated from Richard L. Draft and Robert H. Legend in 1986. Theory mentioned face-to-face communication richness that written communication. And this study also contributed to media richness theory by examining the new digital medium, beside the traditional written communication medium, because this theory is only discussed before the growing with rapid internet technology. So my study framework is face-to-face communication are effective than digital communication. Digital communication can be included like email, WhatsApp, WeChat, or Facebook Messenger. The literature review showed that the Cornell and Tang, this 2014 study, a new set of generation label in Malaysia. But most of us know that the Western generation label, which is the baby boomer, the Generation X, Generation Y, and also Generation Z. But this is more suitable for us in the Malaysia situation. The seeker, which is the Banjari born in 1943 to 1960, which is 61 years old to 78 years old. The builder, the beginner, born in 1961 to 1981, which is 40 to 60 years old. And the developer Permaju, born in 1982 to 2004, is 70 years old to 39 years old. The last generation will be Generation Z, is born in 2005 onward, below the 16 years old. And the one of the scholar right is 2017 state that 65% of the millennial, which is the developer, prefer the digital communication rather than in person. And the other scholar Wong and Mouse in 2018, the statistics show that the 24 million of the active social users in Malaysia use Facebook, which is 70% rate in top 1. The following like YouTube, WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook Messenger. So how am I going to research procedure? I definitely choose the purposive sampling, invite the participant to provide the detail and in-depth information to investigate the study. So from this, using the qualitative method in-depth interview, I can know more what actually in thinking about inside the Southern University College happening in communication breakdown. And this interview sample is achieved the point of stipulation after 8 participants. The total of 11 selected participants from Southern University staff. And this interview is conducted by face-to-face interview, an interview section around 30 to 60 minutes. The interview is open-ended question and all the participants were anonymous and sign the proper concept agreement. So the demographic of this study is participant A until the participant K. It comes from the different various of the position level. It can be executive, manager, and top management. They have a different gender from male and female, and 6 of them is come from developer, 3 of them come from the builder, and another 3 persons is come from the seeker. And from this of the data analysis, I conclusion for the 6 team. The team 1 is explanation is what actually the communication medium preferred by different generation. Most of the Southern UC staff actually prefer to face-to-face interaction and two-way communication because it can be more easier, simple way to get the information and actually what they want to know and more clearly. And the reason of using the preferred communication medium in organizational communication by different generation staff, definitely the priority is the problem and challenge during the communication. How they going to communicate smooth with the colleague and how they can receive from the center with the better distribution of necessary information. The last about the communication style improve among the Southern University College staff. The first is improving the productivity approach, organizational environment change, and leadership development and motivation. So these 3, we can show that improving the productivity approach is to increase what actually they want to get from the communication and improving their productivity. And organizational environment change, which means the friendly environment, will help them to easily understand the colleague feeling and also easy to speak out their opinion. And the leadership actually can motivate and stimulate the colleague, which is can be speak out more of their opinion and what actually the suggestion. The summary of the result. The results show that the face-to-face communication still a rich communication medium that convey the information and still provide more hidden message in facial expression, gestures, tone, and body language. The method of the communication must be clear, simple, and it can use the human language that the meaning can be understood. And face-to-face communication and digital communication are both significant for organization as it could make out the communication media insufficient. The last conclusion is the research show that the different generation staff of Southern UC prefer a combination of the face-to-face communication and email as the major communication medium because they feel that face-to-face communication easy to understand what actually the sender want to send the message. And the email is just a proof when they want to check back the communication, they can check back the previously communication and also understand what actually they want to speak out. Organizations must have a better and friendly working environment and climate. So this means that when the colleagues understand each other, they can easily to speak out what actually they want to say and no need to hidden the message to keep out what the word they want to say out. The Southern UC have a traditional hierarchy structure with vertical management level. It implies the two-way communication between the top management and bottom level subordinate, which means that most of the organizations in Malaysia, they have a traditional hierarchy structure. It blocks the communication and hit them and stop them to a two-way communication. So only the leader to speak out, the subordinate not willing to say out. And the company need to make more sufficient support in training and team building activity to build a staff relationship. When the colleague in between they have a relationship, they can be easily to work out in the team. They can speed out the communication and also make the task and more efficient. The finding also suggests the top management and manager should always have an open, transparent, and elegant leadership style. Active listening power is an essential skill for staff, especially for the leader. When the leader willing to listening their subordinate, so it can be help them to easy to plan and also be doing the new policy. To improve the communication, the team should involve the staff from various positions and level in the regular discussion. This could help build a constructive opinion and feedback. So it shows that when the discussion including a different positions such as like the top management, manager, executive, or even the assistant, so it could be help the feedback and opinion from different level and different of the sound. So this is the reference what I'm using in this slide, and this is my presentation. Thank you.
All right. Okay. I think that's the end of our presentation today. Okay, but before we proceed to the Q&A section, first thing first, okay, here the reminder, especially for the Southern UC student. Here we got the QR code on the screen, upper left-hand side. If you want to, okay, claim your Live 2030 point, you can scan the QR code and claim your point accordingly. Okay, so without further ado, now let's proceed to the Q&A part. Okay, let's check on our online Microsoft team to see whether there is any questions. Okay, yeah, here the first question from Miss Kerr Yue Li. Okay, Miss Kerr is the HOD of the Department of Journalism and Communication. Here the question is, I think this is targeted on the presenter one, Mr. Lim, right? Okay, what is your suggestions for an audience in filtering the news during pandemic then? Okay, Mr. Lim, please.
Yeah. As an audience, I think we should pay more attention to the news source. We need to make sure that the news source is credible or not. And we also need to remember that every news stations will have their own process of framing. So we need to confirm that read the news more than one channel, and then we can know the reality better and read the news regionally. Yeah, that's all.
Okay, we thank you, Mr. Lim, for the answer. Okay, now we have another question from Dr. Saifuddin. Dr. Saifuddin is the Dean of FHSS, right? Okay, here's the question for Mr. Lai. Okay, yeah, Mr. Lai. Okay, may I know, are there any journal publications from this research? So is there any?
I think my journal publication will be soon. But if let's say you want to know more about what actually I use in this journal, you can go to the library and search for my final of the dissertation.
Okay. Yeah, so I just wondering, okay, is there any other question? Because we really welcome all sorts of feedback, suggestions, or even question arises from you guys. Okay, so please do not hesitate to actually let us know, especially through this online platform. I hope that this can be really interactive section, especially this is the first ever symposium especially online symposium that we ever organized. So I can see a lot of staff and the student, okay, from our web Microsoft team. So please do not hesitate to drop your question here. So is there any other question? Yeah. Hold on, just let me check my cell phone as well. Okay. Yeah, we're waiting for a few seconds. If there's no more, I think that will be our the first ever communication symposium of our school. Okay, just try your best. If you have any other question, kindly let us know. Okay, if no, okay, then I think that we can do the wrap up of today communication symposium today. Okay, just the last reminder, if you do not have anything, then I think that will be for the communication symposium today. And we thank you and we look forward to seeing you in the near future. There is more webinar and the symposium to come. Okay, we thank you and wish you have a good evening. Bye-bye, everyone.